7-year-old Dorothy Williams stood in the massive marble lobby of Barton Tech, her tiny hands trembling as she clutched a wrinkled envelope against her bright red dress. The letter inside contained words that would destroy everything Kevin Barton thought he knew about his life. Security guards in crisp maroon uniforms surrounded the small girl, their voices growing louder and more demanding. "You need to leave right now," barked Officer Martinez, reaching for Dorothy's arm. "This is a private building." Dorothy stepped back, her dark eyes wide with fear but determined. "I need to see Mr. Kevin Barton. My mama said it's very important." "Listen, kid, Mr. Barton doesn't see anyone without appointments. Especially not children who wander in off the street." The little girl's lower lip quivered, but she held the letter tighter. "Please, sir. My mama is very sick. She wrote this letter for Mr. Kevin. She said he would want to read it." Rebecca Torres, the head of security, watched the scene unfold from the elevator bank. Something about the child's desperate plea caught her attention. At 45, Rebecca had seen enough of the world to recognize genuine need when she saw it. The girl's mixed-race features were striking, and there was something familiar about her eyes. "What's going on here?" Rebecca asked, stepping forward in her maroon security uniform. "Found this kid in the lobby claiming she needs to see Mr. Barton," Martinez explained. "She won't leave." Rebecca knelt down to Dorothy's eye level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Dorothy Williams. My mama is Nancy Johnson. She told me to bring this letter to Mr. Kevin Barton. She said it would explain everything." The name Nancy Johnson hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She remembered Nancy well. 8 years ago, Nancy had been a frequent visitor to the building, always wearing those beautiful green dresses that complemented her dark skin perfectly. She had been Kevin's girlfriend, the woman who had disappeared suddenly, leaving Kevin heartbroken and confused. "Show me the letter," Rebecca said gently. Dorothy hesitated, then held up the envelope. In shaky handwriting it was addressed to Kevin Barton, CO, Barton Tech. The return address showed Nancy Johnson's name. Rebecca's mind raced. If Nancy was sick and sending her daughter here with a letter, something serious was happening. And if this child was Nancy's daughter, and she was 7 years old, the timeline would match up perfectly with when Nancy had disappeared. "Martinez, escort everyone else back to their duties," Rebecca ordered. "I'm taking Dorothy to see Mr. Barton." "Ma'am, you know Mr. Barton's rules about unscheduled visitors. This isn't a regular visitor. Trust me on this one." Rebecca took Dorothy's free hand. "Come on, honey. Let's go see Mr. Barton." As they rode the elevator to the 40th floor, Dorothy looked up at Rebecca with those familiar eyes. "Is Mr. Kevin nice?" "Mama said he was the kindest man she ever knew." "He is a good man," Rebecca replied, though she wondered how Kevin would react to this surprise from his past. The elevator doors opened to reveal the executive floor's pristine white walls and gleaming floors. Kevin's assistant, Mrs. Patterson, looked up from her desk in surprise. "Rebecca, what's this about?" "Mr. Barton is in back-to-back meetings all day." "This can't wait," Rebecca said firmly. "Tell him Nancy Johnson's daughter is here with a letter." Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. Everyone who had worked at Barton Tech long enough knew about Nancy Johnson. The beautiful woman who had captured their boss's heart and then vanished without explanation. "He's with Susan Blake right now reviewing the quarterly reports." "Interrupt them. This is more important than any business meeting." Mrs. Patterson hesitated, then picked up her phone. "Mr. Barton, I'm sorry to disturb you, but Rebecca Torres is here with a young girl who says she has a letter from Nancy Johnson." Even through the closed office door, they could hear the sudden silence that fell over the room. "Send them in immediately," came Kevin's voice through the intercom. Dorothy's small hand squeezed Rebecca's as they approached the massive oak doors. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Don't be, sweetheart. Mr. Kevin will help you and your mama. I promise." The doors swung open to reveal Kevin Barton's impressive corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city skyline. Kevin stood behind his desk in a sharp blue suit, his dark hair perfectly styled, but his face had gone pale. Beside him, Susan Blake crossed her arms, her expensive black pantsuit and blonde hair making her look like a magazine model, but her expression was far from welcoming. "Nancy Johnson," Kevin said quietly, as if testing the name on his lips after years of silence. Dorothy stepped forward, her red dress bright against the neutral office colors. "Mr. Kevin? I'm Dorothy. This is from my mama." She held out the letter with both hands, her small voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. Kevin walked around his desk slowly, his eyes never leaving Dorothy's face. As he got closer, Rebecca saw the exact moment when recognition hit him. Dorothy had Nancy's eyes, her nose, her smile. But there was something else there too, something that made Kevin's breath catch. "How old are you, Dorothy?" he asked gently, kneeling down to her level. 7. "I'll be 8 next month." Kevin's hands shook slightly as he took the letter. 7 years old. The timing was perfect. Too perfect to be a coincidence. How can a simple letter from a child's mother change everything in just one moment? What secrets could be so powerful that they would bring a billionaire CEO to his knees? Subscribe to find out what happens next and share your thoughts in the comments below. Susan stepped forward, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Kevin, you can't seriously be considering whatever scam this is. Anyone could have coached this child to say these things." But Kevin wasn't listening to Susan anymore. His entire focus was on the little girl standing before him in her bright red dress, holding the letter that was about to change his world forever. Dorothy looked between the adults, sensing the tension in the room. "My mama said you would understand when you read her words. She said you would remember the promise you made to her." Kevin's heart stopped. Nancy was the only person who knew about the promise he had made the night before she disappeared. The promise to love her forever, to never give up on their future together. With trembling fingers, he opened the envelope and began to read the words that would shatter everything he thought he knew about the last 8 years of his life. Kevin's eyes moved across Nancy's familiar handwriting, each word hitting him like a physical blow. His hands trembled as he read. "My dearest Kevin, if you are reading this letter, it means I am too sick to tell you the truth myself. I need you to know that Dorothy is your daughter. She was born 8 months after I left, and every day since then, I have regretted the decision that tore us apart. Susan came to me the day after you proposed. She showed me photos that she claimed proved you were cheating on me with her. She said you were only with me temporarily, that you could never truly love someone like me. I was young and scared and I believed her lies. By the time I realized the truth, you had moved on with Susan. I saw the engagement announcement in the newspaper. I thought you were happy, so I stayed away. I thought I was protecting you from the burden of an unwanted child. But now I'm sick, Kevin. Really sick. And Dorothy needs her father. She needs the man I fell in love with all those years ago. The man who promised me forever under the stars in Central Park. Please don't turn her away. She's the best part of both of us. All my love, Nancy." Kevin read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. "Dorothy is your daughter." The room seemed to spin around him as he looked at the little girl who was watching him with Nancy's eyes. "Mr. Kevin?" Dorothy's voice was small and worried. "Are you okay? You look sad." Kevin looked into her face and saw himself there too. The shape of her chin, the way she tilted her head when she was concerned. How had he not seen it immediately? "I'm not sad, Dorothy," he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm just surprised." Susan's voice cut through the moment like ice. "Kevin, you can't possibly believe this obvious manipulation. Look at the timing. Nancy shows up now, right when Barton Tech is about to go public. She wants money." "Susan, please," Kevin said without looking away from Dorothy. "No, I won't be silent while some woman from your past tries to scam you with a child who could belong to anyone. Demand a DNA test immediately." Dorothy's face crumpled at Susan's harsh words. "I'm not lying. Mama showed me pictures of her and Mr. Kevin together. She said he was the love of her life." Kevin felt something break inside his chest. He knelt down again, bringing himself to Dorothy's eye level. "I believe you, sweetheart. And I believe your mama. Would you like to call me Daddy?" The word felt strange on his tongue but also right. More right than anything had felt in 8 years. Dorothy's face lit up like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Really? You want to be my daddy?" "More than anything in the world." Susan's face twisted with rage. "Kevin, think about what you're doing. Your reputation, your business, everything we've built together." "Everything we've built?" Kevin stood up, his voice growing stronger. "You mean everything you built on lies?" He looked at Susan properly for the first time since Dorothy had entered the room. The woman he had planned to marry, the woman he had spent 8 years with, suddenly looked like a stranger. How had he never noticed the calculating coldness in her eyes? "I gave you 8 years of my life," Susan said, her voice rising. "I stood by you when Nancy left. I helped you build this company into what it is today. You helped destroy the best thing that ever happened to me." Rebecca cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Barton, would you like me to take Dorothy down to the cafeteria while you and Miss Blake discuss this privately?" Kevin looked at Dorothy, who was clutching her letter and looking overwhelmed by the adult emotions swirling around her. "That's a good idea. Dorothy, would you like some ice cream while I take care of some business?" Dorothy nodded, but her voice was worried. You'll still be my daddy when I come back? Kevin's heart squeezed tight. I'll always be your daddy from now until forever. That's a promise. As Rebecca led Dorothy out of the office, Kevin heard Susan pacing behind him. 8 years, Kevin. 8 years I've been with you. You can't throw that away for some woman who abandoned you and a child who might not even be yours. Kevin turned around slowly. Nancy didn't abandon me. You drove her away with lies. I protected you. Nancy Johnson was never right for you. She was a secretary, Kevin. A secretary with a high school education who would have held you back from everything you've achieved. She was the woman I loved. The woman I wanted to marry and spend my life with. And look what you have now instead. A billion-dollar company, respect from every major business leader in the country, a lifestyle most people only dream of. Kevin walked to his window and looked out at the city below. For 8 years he had thrown himself into work, building an empire to fill the hole Nancy's departure had left in his life. He had achieved everything Susan was talking about, but none of it had ever made him truly happy. Do you know what I was thinking about this morning? He asked quietly. What? I was thinking about how empty this office feels. How empty my penthouse feels. How empty everything feels despite all the success. He turned back to face Susan. And then a 7-year-old girl walks in here and calls me daddy, and suddenly everything makes sense again. Susan's expression hardened. Fine. You want to play house with Nancy Johnson and her child? See how long that lasts when the board finds out their CEO has an illegitimate daughter. See how the investors react when they learn you're involved in some sordid drama from your past. The board and the investors will support whatever makes me happy. And Dorothy makes me happy. Nancy makes me happy. Nancy might not even want you back, Kevin. Did you think about that? You've changed. You're not the same man she left 8 years ago. For the first time since reading Nancy's letter, Kevin smiled. You're right. I'm not the same man. I'm stronger now. I'm successful now. And I'm smart enough to recognize lies when I hear them. He walked to his desk and picked up the phone. Mrs. Patterson, cancel all my appointments for the rest of the week. And get Dr. Patricia Chin on the line. I need to find out which hospital Nancy Johnson is in. Susan stared at him in disbelief. You're really going to do this? You're going to choose them over me? I'm going to choose love over lies, Susan. I should have done it 8 years ago. Susan's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the calculating woman underneath. You'll regret this, Kevin. They both will. As Susan stormed out of the office, Kevin felt like he was breathing freely for the first time in 8 years. Somewhere in this city, Nancy was sick and alone, probably thinking he didn't care about her or their daughter. But that was about to change. Kevin Barton was going to find his family, and this time no one would tear them apart. Kevin sat alone in his office, staring at Nancy's letter as memories flooded back with painful clarity. 8 years dissolved away, and he was 27 again, meeting the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Nancy had been working as a receptionist at the accounting firm that handled Barton textbooks. Kevin had gone there personally to review some documents, and she had greeted him with a smile that stopped him in his tracks. Her dark skin seemed to glow under the office lights, and she wore a simple green dress that made her look like springtime itself. Mr. Barton? I have your files ready, she had said, her voice warm and professional. Please call me Kevin. And thank you for staying late to prepare these. It's no problem. I know how important your company is. They had talked for 20 minutes about nothing and everything. Nancy was studying business administration at night school while working full-time to support herself. She had dreams of starting her own event planning company someday. Kevin found himself completely captivated by her intelligence, her ambition, and her genuine kindness. He had asked her to dinner that night and she had said yes. Their first date had lasted until sunrise. They talked about books, travel, their dreams for the future. Nancy had grown up in foster care, moving from home to home until she aged out of the system at 18. She had worked multiple jobs to put herself through school, never letting hardship dim her optimism. I want to create beautiful moments for people, she had told him over coffee at a tiny diner. Weddings, celebrations, moments when families come together and remember what matters most. Kevin had fallen in love with her that very night. For 2 years they had been inseparable. Nancy quit her job at the accounting firm and came to work for Barton Tech as Kevin's personal assistant. Some people whispered about their relationship, but Kevin didn't care. Nancy was brilliant, dedicated, and she made him want to be a better man. She started taking business classes at Columbia in the evenings. Kevin would pick her up after her classes, and they would drive through Central Park talking about their future. Nancy wanted to start her event planning business after graduation. Kevin was already planning to fund it as a wedding gift. "I want to marry you," he had told her one night as they sat on a bench overlooking the park lake. "I want to spend every day of my life making you as happy as you make me." Nancy had cried when he proposed, saying yes through her tears of joy. "You promise me forever?" she had whispered. "Forever and beyond," he had replied. The ring had been a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds, chosen to match the green dress she had worn the day they met. Nancy had cried again when she saw it, saying it was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. They planned a spring wedding. Nancy was finishing her degree and working on the preliminary plans for her business. Everything was perfect. Then Susan Blake had arrived. Kevin remembered the day Susan started at Barton Tech as the new marketing director. She was ambitious, polished, and immediately began positioning herself as an asset to the company. She was also beautiful in a cold, calculated way that some men found attractive. Kevin had never given Susan a second thought romantically. He was completely devoted to Nancy. But Susan had clearly had other plans. Looking back now, Kevin could see how carefully Susan had orchestrated everything. She began staying late at the office, finding excuses to work on projects with Kevin. She scheduled client dinners when Nancy had evening classes, making it seem natural that she would accompany Kevin as the marketing director. "Nancy seems overwhelmed with school and work," Susan had mentioned casually one evening. "Are you sure she's ready for the pressure of being with someone in your position?" Kevin had dismissed such comments, but Susan kept planting seeds of doubt. She questioned whether Nancy truly understood the business world. She suggested that Nancy's background made her unsuitable for the kind of social events Kevin would need to attend as his company grew. "I'm not saying Nancy isn't lovely," Susan would say with false concern. "I just worry that she might hold you back from reaching your full potential." But Kevin had never wavered in his love for Nancy. He trusted her completely. Which was why Nancy's sudden departure had destroyed him so completely. One day Nancy had seemed perfectly normal. She had kissed him goodbye that morning, excited about her final exams. She had plans to meet him for lunch to finalize details for their wedding venue. But Nancy never showed up for lunch. When Kevin went to their apartment that evening, he found her gone. All her clothes, her books, her pictures, everything. The only thing left was the engagement ring on the kitchen counter and a brief note. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Please don't try to find me." Kevin had been devastated. He had hired private investigators, called every friend and contact Nancy had ever mentioned. No one knew where she had gone. It was as if she had simply vanished. 3 months later, when Kevin was still barely functioning, Susan had been there with comfort and support. She helped him get through the worst of his grief, slowly rebuilding his confidence and helping him focus on growing Barton Tech. "You deserve someone who appreciates what you have to offer," Susan had told him. "Someone who won't run away when things get real." Gradually, Kevin had allowed Susan into his life as more than a colleague. She was the opposite of Nancy in every way, sophisticated where Nancy was genuine, calculating where Nancy was spontaneous, cold where Nancy was warm. But she was there, and Nancy was gone, and Kevin had convinced himself that maybe Susan was right. Maybe he needed someone who understood his world. For 8 years, Kevin had buried his love for Nancy and tried to build something with Susan. But it had never felt right. Every anniversary, every holiday, every quiet moment, he found himself thinking about Nancy and wondering what had gone wrong. Now he knew. Susan had shown Nancy those fake photos, had convinced the woman he loved that he was unfaithful. Nancy had been 24 years old, pregnant with his child, and faced with what she thought was proof of his betrayal. Of course she had run. Kevin would have run too. But Nancy had been carrying his daughter. For 8 years, Dorothy had grown up without her father because of Susan's lies. Kevin felt a rage building inside him unlike anything he had ever experienced. Susan had stolen 8 years of his life. 8 years of Nancy's life. 8 years of Dorothy's childhood. But worse than that, she had stolen the family he had dreamed of building with Nancy. She had stolen the happiness they could have shared, the memories they should have made together. Kevin picked up his phone and dialed Mrs. Patterson. "I need you to start an immediate investigation into Susan Blake. Financial records, employment history, everything. And I need the contact information for Dr. Patricia Chin. She should know where Nancy is." As he waited for the call to connect, Kevin looked out at the city and made a silent promise to Nancy and Dorothy. He would make up for every lost day, every missed birthday, every bedtime story he should have read. Susan Blake had had 8 years to build her lies. But Kevin would spend the rest of his life building something real with the family he should have had all along. This time, nothing would tear them apart. Dr. Patricia Chen looked up from her charts as Kevin, Rebecca, and Dorothy approached the nurse's station at Metropolitan General Hospital. The doctor was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Dr. Chin? I'm Kevin Barton. I believe you're treating Nancy Johnson." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Mr. Barton? Nancy mentioned your name. You're Dorothy's father." Dorothy stepped forward, still wearing her bright red dress but now holding Kevin's hand. "Is my mama going to be okay, Dr. Chin?" The doctor knelt down to Dorothy's level. "Your mama is much better today, sweetheart. The medicine is helping her feel stronger." Kevin felt his heart start beating again. "Better?" The letter made it sound like she was dying. Dr. Chin stood up and gestured for them to move away from Dorothy's hearing. "Nancy was very sick when she first came in 3 weeks ago. Severe pneumonia, complicated by malnutrition and exhaustion. She'd been working 3 jobs to support Dorothy and had been ignoring her own health for months." 3 jobs. Kevin's voice was tight with emotion. Cleaning offices at night, working at a diner during the day and doing bookkeeping from home in between. She collapsed at the diner and was brought here unconscious. Kevin closed his eyes, imagining Nancy working herself to death while he lived in luxury, never knowing she needed help. "But she's responding well to treatment now," Dr. Chin continued. "With proper nutrition and rest, she should make a full recovery. The main issue now is the medical bills. Her insurance is minimal, and she's already talked about discharging herself early because she can't afford the extended care." "She won't be discharging herself," Kevin said firmly. "Whatever she needs, whatever it costs, I'll take care of everything." Dr. Chin studied his face. "Nancy said you were a good man. She also said she hadn't seen you in 8 years and wasn't sure you'd want to be involved." Dorothy tugged on Kevin's sleeve. "Can I see Mama now? I want to tell her you're really my daddy." Kevin looked down at his daughter and felt his heart expand in his chest. "Let's go see Mama." They followed Dr. Chin down a long corridor lined with rooms. Kevin's steps slowed as they approached room 314. Through the small window, he could see Nancy sitting up in bed, wearing a hospital gown in that same beautiful green color that had always been perfect on her. She was thinner than he remembered and there were dark circles under her eyes, but she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Her dark skin had lost some of its glow, but her smile as she watched something on the television was exactly the same. "Mama." Dorothy pushed open the door and ran to the bed. Nancy's face lit up with pure joy as she gathered her daughter into her arms. "Dorothy, how did it go, baby? Did you find Mr. Kevin?" "Mama, guess what? He really is my daddy and he wants to take care of us." Nancy looked up and saw Kevin standing in the doorway. For a moment, time stopped completely. 8 years disappeared, and they were just Kevin and Nancy, looking at each other with all the love they had tried so hard to forget. "Hello, Nancy," Kevin said softly. "Kevin." Her voice was barely a whisper. He stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving her face. "I got your letter." Nancy's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know if you would want to see us. I thought maybe you were happy with your life now." "Happy?" Kevin moved closer to the bed. "Nancy, I haven't been happy since the day you left. Not really happy." Dorothy looked between her parents with wide eyes. "Are you crying, Mama?" "These are good tears, baby. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're very happy." Kevin reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. "I kept this," he said, unwrapping Nancy's engagement ring. "I kept it in my desk drawer for 8 years, hoping someday I would see you again." Nancy stared at the emerald ring, her hand trembling as she reached for it. "Kevin, I'm so sorry. Susan showed me those photos and I believed her. I was young and scared and stupid." "You weren't stupid. You were young and pregnant and faced with what looked like proof that the man you loved was betraying you." Kevin sat on the edge of the hospital bed. "Susan fooled both of us. You know about the photos?" "I know about everything. The lies, the manipulation, all of it." Kevin's voice grew fierce. "She stole 8 years from us, Nancy. 8 years of our life together, 8 years of me being Dorothy's father." Nancy looked at Dorothy, who was snuggled against her side, listening to every word. "I wanted to tell you about her so many times. But when I saw your engagement announcement in the newspaper, I was never engaged to Susan. Not really. I was just trying to fill the hole you left behind." Dr. Chin cleared her throat from the doorway. "I hate to interrupt, but Nancy needs her rest. You can visit again tomorrow." "Actually," Kevin said, standing up, "I'd like to arrange for Nancy to be transferred to a private room, with the best specialists available. Money is no object." Nancy started to protest. "Kevin, I can't let you pay for." "Nancy," Kevin said gently, taking her hand. We lost 8 years because of pride and misunderstandings. Please don't let pride cost us any more time together. Let me take care of you and Dorothy. Let me be the man I should have been 8 years ago. Nancy looked into his eyes and saw the same love that had first captured her heart all those years ago. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Kevin smiled and slipped the engagement ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, just like it always had. Daddy, Dorothy said, testing out the word, does this mean we're going to be a family? Kevin looked at his daughter and the woman he had never stopped loving. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be a family. As they left the hospital that evening, Kevin felt like he was walking on air. Nancy was alive, she was going to be fine, and they had a beautiful daughter together. After 8 years of emptiness, his life suddenly felt complete again. But as they reached the parking garage, Rebecca touched his arm. Mr. Barton, we should talk about Susan. She's not going to give up easily. Kevin's expression hardened. Susan had already cost them 8 years. He would not let her cost them one more day. Then we better be ready for whatever she tries next. The next morning, Kevin arrived at his office to find chaos waiting for him. Susan had clearly been busy overnight. His assistant, Mrs. Patterson, looked frazzled as she handed him a stack of phone messages. Mr. Barton, Miss Blake has been calling board members since 6 this morning. She scheduled an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Kevin flipped through the messages. 3 board members, 2 major investors, and a reporter from the Business Journal had all called before 8 a.m. What is she telling them? I don't know the details, but Mr. Anderson called personally. He said you should call him immediately before the situation gets worse. Kevin dialed Tom Anderson's number. Tom had been his best friend since college and was now Barton Tech's chief operating officer. If anyone would give him straight answers, it would be Tom. Kevin, thank God you called. What the hell is going on? Susan is spreading lies about me. What has she told you? She called at dawn claiming you're having some kind of breakdown. Something about a woman from your past showing up with a child, demanding money. She says you're so emotionally compromised that you're making dangerous financial commitments without board approval. Kevin felt his jaw clench. And you believed her? I don't know what to believe. You disappeared yesterday afternoon without explanation. Susan says you're planning to liquidate company assets to pay for medical bills for people who aren't even family. Tom, the child is my daughter. Nancy didn't leave me 8 years ago because she wanted to. Susan manipulated her into thinking I was cheating. Silence stretched across the phone line. Your daughter? Tom's voice was stunned. Kevin, are you sure? I'm certain. And I need you to help me prove what Susan did. What do you need? Meet me in my office in 20 minutes. And bring Rebecca Torres with you. When Tom and Rebecca arrived, Kevin had already pulled Susan's employment file and was reviewing her background check from 8 years ago. Look at this, Kevin said, spreading documents across his desk. Susan Blake, marketing graduate from NYU, excellent references, no red flags. Rebecca studied the papers. Mr. Barton, with your permission, I'd like to dig deeper into her past. Sometimes people are very good at hiding things. Do it. I want to know everything about Susan Blake from the day she was born. Tom looked uncomfortable. Kevin, even if Susan did manipulate Nancy 8 years ago, that doesn't necessarily mean. Tom, Susan threatened Nancy and Dorothy yesterday. She told me I would regret choosing them over her. She threatened a child? Not directly, but the implication was clear. Rebecca was already on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Mr. Barton, I'm running a comprehensive background check now. Financial records, employment history, social media, everything. While Rebecca worked, Kevin told Tom everything about Dorothy's visit, Nancy's letter, and his trip to the hospital. I can't believe Nancy has been struggling all these years while I lived in luxury, Kevin said. 3 jobs, Tom. She was working 3 jobs and still couldn't afford proper medical care. If Susan really did what you think she did, she's going to pay for it, Tom said grimly. Rebecca looked up from her computer, her expression grim. Mr. Barton, I found something. Susan's financial records show some interesting patterns 8 years ago. What kind of patterns? Large cash deposits that don't match her salary. $5,000 deposited the day after Nancy left. Another $3,000 a week later. Kevin felt cold dread settle in his stomach. Someone paid her. It gets worse. I found the photographer she used to create those fake photos. His business records show a payment from S. Blake for professional photo editing services dated the same week Nancy disappeared. The evidence was damning, but Kevin needed more. Can you prove the photos were fabricated? Already working on it. I've contacted the photographer. He's agreed to provide testimony about what Susan paid him to create. Tom was staring at the financial records. Kevin, these cash deposits, they're too large to be gifts or side income. Someone with serious money was paying Susan to break you and Nancy up. But who would want to do that? Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and looked up with a strange expression. Mr. Barton, I just got a message from our security team downstairs. There's a woman in the lobby claiming to be Dorothy's grandmother. She says Nancy isn't Dorothy's real mother. Kevin felt the world tilt around him. What? She has legal documents claiming custody of Dorothy. And she's with a lawyer. That's impossible. Nancy is Dorothy's mother. Sir, the woman says her name is Patricia Blake. Kevin's blood turned to ice. Blake. As in Susan Blake. She claims to be Susan's aunt. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. Susan hadn't just manipulated Nancy 8 years ago. She had been planning something much bigger, something that involved her family and legal documents. Get Dorothy and Nancy on the phone immediately, Kevin ordered. And call our lawyers. If Susan thinks she can steal my daughter after keeping her from me for 8 years, she's about to learn exactly what kind of man she's dealing with. Tom was already dialing the company's legal team. Kevin, if they have legitimate custody documents? They don't. They can't. But that won't stop them from trying to take Dorothy away while they fabricate whatever evidence they need. Rebecca was typing furiously on her laptop. Mr. Barton, I'm pulling everything I can find on Patricia Blake. If she's involved in this scheme, I'll find proof. Kevin's phone rang. The caller ID showed the hospital's main number. Mr. Barton? It was Dr. Chin, and her voice was tense. We have a problem. 2 women just arrived claiming to be Dorothy's family. They have legal papers and they're demanding we release Dorothy to their custody. Don't let them near my daughter. I'm on my way. As Kevin grabbed his jacket, he realized that Susan's games were far from over. She had had all night to plan her next move and she was playing for keeps. But Kevin Barton hadn't built a billion-dollar company by backing down from fights. And he had never had more reason to fight than he did right now. His family was under attack and he would do whatever it took to protect them. Kevin raced through the hospital corridors with Tom and Rebecca close behind him. Dr. Chin met them at the elevator, her face tight with concern. They're still in the lobby, she said. Hospital security is with them, but they're demanding immediate access to Dorothy. The documents look official. Where are Nancy and Dorothy now? Safe in Nancy's room. I've stationed extra security there and told them not to let anyone in without your approval. When they reached the lobby, Kevin saw 2 women arguing loudly with hospital security. The older woman appeared to be in her 60s, wearing an expensive navy suit and carrying herself with the kind of authority that came from money and privilege. The younger woman was clearly a lawyer, her briefcase open and documents spread across the reception desk. I'm Patricia Blake, the older woman was saying in a voice that brooked no argument. That child has been living in poverty with a woman who kidnapped her from our family. We have legal custody. Kevin stepped forward. I'm Kevin Barton, Dorothy's father. What exactly do you think you're doing? Patricia Blake looked him up and down with obvious disdain. Mr. Barton, I'm Susan's aunt. Dorothy is my granddaughter, and she belongs with family who can properly care for her. Dorothy is my daughter and she belongs with her parents. The lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in her 40s, opened her briefcase. Mr. Barton, these documents clearly establish Mrs. Blake's custody rights. The child was abandoned with Nancy Johnson, who has no legal claim to her. Kevin's anger was building, but he kept his voice calm. Nancy Johnson is Dorothy's mother. I have the birth certificate to prove it. A birth certificate that lists father unknown, the lawyer replied smoothly. There's no proof you're the biological father. Then we'll do a DNA test right now. Patricia Blake sniffed dismissively. Convenient. A rich man suddenly claims paternity when it's beneficial to him. Rebecca stepped forward, her security badge clearly visible. Mrs. Blake, can you explain these financial records showing payments to your niece Susan 8 years ago? Payments that coincide exactly with Nancy Johnson's departure from the city? The lawyer's eyes sharpened. Those records are irrelevant to this custody matter. Actually, Tom said, pulling out his phone, they're very relevant. I just spoke with our legal team. Any custody documents obtained through fraud are invalid. Kevin looked at Patricia Blake and saw something familiar in her cold, calculating expression. She had the same look Susan got when her plans were falling apart. Dr. Chen, Kevin said, I'd like to see Dorothy and Nancy now. These ladies can wait here while we sort out their false documents. You can't keep us from our family, Patricia Blake snapped. Watch me. As they walked toward the elevator, Rebecca leaned close to Kevin. Mr. Barton, I found something else. Patricia Blake has been arrested twice for fraud in the past 10 years. Both cases were settled out of court with sealed records. And Susan would have access to her aunt's legal contacts. Exactly. This whole custody claim is probably fabricated. They found Nancy sitting up in her bed, wearing a bright green hospital gown that made her skin glow with returning health. Dorothy was curled up beside her, reading a children's book out loud. Both of them looked up anxiously when Kevin entered. Daddy. Dorothy scrambled off the bed and ran to Kevin. Mama said some mean ladies want to take me away. Kevin picked up his daughter, holding her tight. That's not going to happen, sweetheart. I promise. Nancy's eyes were wide with fear. Kevin, they said I kidnapped Dorothy. They said I'm not her real mother. Nancy, look at me. Kevin sat on the edge of her bed, still holding Dorothy. You are Dorothy's mother. I'm her father. We're her family and nobody is going to change that. But the papers they showed the nurses looked so official. Tom stepped forward. Nancy, I'm Tom Anderson, Kevin's business partner. Our lawyers are already proving those documents are fake. Susan and her aunt are trying to scare you. Dorothy looked up at Kevin with worried eyes. Daddy, why do those ladies want to hurt us? Kevin's heart broke at his daughter's fear. How could Susan involve a 7-year-old child in her twisted schemes? Sometimes, sweetheart, when people are very unhappy with their own lives, they try to hurt other people who are happy. But we're not going to let them hurt our family. Are you going to marry Mama? The innocent question caught Kevin off guard. He looked at Nancy, whose cheeks had turned a beautiful shade of pink. Dorothy, Nancy said gently, Daddy and I need to talk about grown-up things first. But you love each other, right? I can tell by the way you look at each other. Kevin couldn't help but smile. His 7-year-old daughter was remarkably perceptive. Yes, he said, looking directly at Nancy, I love your mama very much. I never stopped loving her. Nancy's eyes filled with tears. I never stopped loving you either. Then you should get married, Dorothy said matter-of-factly. That's what people do when they love each other. Dr. Chin knocked on the door. Mr. Barton? Your lawyers are here and they've brought some interesting information about those custody documents. Kevin's legal team consisted of 3 of the city's best attorneys. The lead lawyer, Michael Roberts, looked grimly satisfied as he entered the room. Mr. Barton, the custody documents are complete fabrications. Patricia Blake has no legal relationship to Dorothy, and her criminal history makes her completely unsuitable for custody even if she did. What about Susan's involvement? We're building a case for harassment, fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence Ms. Torres gathered about the fake photographs 8 years ago, combined with today's custody scam, should be enough to ensure Susan Blake never bothers your family again. Nancy reached for Kevin's hand. Is it really over? Not quite, Michael replied. We need to file for emergency custody to protect Dorothy while we build the criminal case. Mr. Barton, are you prepared to be listed as Dorothy's legal father? Kevin looked at his daughter, who was watching him with complete trust and love. More than prepared. I want to adopt Dorothy officially and give her my last name. Daddy, Dorothy said, does that mean I'll be Dorothy Barton? If you want to be. Dorothy clapped her hands together. Dorothy Barton sounds perfect. Nancy squeezed Kevin's hand. Kevin, are you sure about all this? Taking on a ready-made family, dealing with Susan's attacks. Kevin leaned down and kissed her forehead. Nancy, 8 years ago I asked you to marry me because I wanted to spend my life with you. Having Dorothy just makes that dream even more perfect. So you'll really marry Mama? Dorothy asked hopefully. Kevin looked at Nancy, who was glowing with happiness despite everything they had faced. If she'll have me. Nancy's smile was brighter than sunshine. Always, Kevin. Always. As his family embraced him, Kevin realized that Susan's schemes had actually given him something unexpected. They had forced him to confront his past, to fight for his future, and to prove how much his family meant to him. Whatever Susan tried next, they would face it together. The confrontation Kevin had been dreading came 2 days later. He was in Nancy's hospital room, watching Dorothy color pictures at the bedside table, when Susan Blake walked through the door without permission. She wore a stark black business suit that made her look like she was attending a funeral. Her blonde hair was pulled back severely, and her makeup was perfect, but Kevin could see the desperation in her eyes. Susan, Kevin said, standing immediately. You're not welcome here. 8 years, Kevin. 8 years of my life. Her voice was controlled but trembling with emotion. You're going to throw that away for this fantasy? Nancy pulled Dorothy closer, her protective instincts fully activated. Dorothy, sweetheart, why don't you go find Dr. Chen and ask her about the ice cream she promised you? I want to stay with you and Daddy. It's okay, baby. We'll be right here when you get back. After Dorothy left, Susan stepped further into the room. Nancy Johnson. You haven't changed much. Hello, Susan. Nancy's voice was steady, but Kevin could feel her tension. I suppose you think you've won some great victory here. Swooping back into Kevin's life with your sob story and your convenient child. Kevin's jaw clenched. Susan, I know what you did 8 years ago. The fake photographs, the lies, the money you took to break us up. Susan's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine surprise. I don't know what you're talking about. We have the photographer's testimony. We have your financial records. We know everything. Prove it. Tom Anderson chose that moment to enter, carrying a folder thick with documents. Actually, Susan, we can prove it. All of it. He opened the folder and spread photographs across Nancy's bedside table. The fake photos Susan had used 8 years ago, alongside documentation showing how they had been digitally manipulated. These are the photos you showed Nancy, Tom continued. Our computer forensics team analyzed them. They were created by combining Kevin's image with photos of you from a completely different time and place. Susan's composure began to crack. Those could be fabricated now. Along with the photographer's signed confession? And your Aunt Patricia's criminal record? And the bank records showing payments you received for breaking up Kevin and Nancy? Kevin watched Susan's face as the weight of the evidence settled on her. Who paid you, Susan? Who wanted Nancy and me apart so badly that they hired you to destroy our relationship? For a moment, Susan looked like she might confess everything. Then her expression hardened into familiar calculating coldness. You really want to know the truth, Kevin? Fine. I'll tell you the truth. She turned to Nancy with undisguised hatred. I saved Kevin from making the biggest mistake of his life. You were a secretary, Nancy. A poor little foster kid with nothing to offer a man like Kevin except a pretty face. Susan, Kevin warned. No, let me finish. You want the truth? The truth is that Kevin was never going to be happy with someone like you. You didn't understand his world, his responsibilities, his potential. You would have held him back from everything he's accomplished. Nancy's voice was quiet but strong. And what has he accomplished with you, Susan? Has he been happy? He built $1 billion empire. Has he been happy? Nancy repeated. Susan's silence was answer enough. Kevin stepped between the two women. The only mistake I made was spending 8 years with you instead of finding Nancy and Dorothy. You didn't save me from anything, Susan. You stole the best part of my life. And now what? You're going to play house with Nancy and her daughter? What happens when the novelty wears off? When you remember why ambitious men don't marry their secretaries? Dorothy is my daughter, Susan. She's not Nancy's daughter from someone else. She's mine. The words hit Susan like a physical blow. For the first time since Kevin had known her, she looked completely stunned. That's impossible. DNA test confirmed it yesterday. Dorothy is my biological daughter, conceived before Nancy left 8 years ago. Susan sank into a chair, the full implications finally hitting her. You had a child with her. We had a child together. A daughter who spent 7 years without her father because of your lies. I didn't know she was pregnant. Would it have mattered if you did? Susan's answering silence told Kevin everything he needed to know. Nancy spoke for the first time in several minutes. Susan, why did you hate me so much? I never did anything to hurt you. You had everything I wanted, Susan said bitterly. Kevin loved you in a way he never loved me. In 8 years, he never looked at me the way he looked at you in the first week you worked for him. So you destroyed our lives out of jealousy? I gave him a better life. Look what he's achieved, Nancy. Look at the success, the respect, the empire he's built. Would he have accomplished any of that if he'd been playing house with you and a baby? Kevin felt a flash of the old rage, but it was tempered now by something deeper. Pity. Susan, I would trade every dollar, every achievement, every bit of success for one day of the life I should have had with Nancy and Dorothy. You didn't give me a better life. You gave me an empty one. Rebecca Torres appeared in the doorway. Mr. Barton, the police are here. Are you ready to file charges? Susan's composure finally cracked completely. Kevin, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we can move past this. The only thing we're moving past is our relationship. It's over, Susan. It was over the moment Dorothy walked into my office. You can't do this to me. I gave you everything. You gave me lies. And now you're going to face the consequences. As the police officers entered to arrest Susan for fraud and conspiracy, she made one last desperate plea. Kevin, I love you. I always have. Everything I did was because I love you. Kevin looked at her with sadness rather than anger. Susan, you don't know what love is. Love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't steal children from their fathers. As they led Susan away, Kevin felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. 8 years of living a lie were finally over. Nancy reached for his hand. Is it really finished? It's finished. Susan will face charges, and her Aunt Patricia has already been arrested for the custody fraud. They can't hurt our family anymore. Dorothy came running back into the room, ice cream in hand. Where did the mean lady go? She went away, sweetheart. And she's never coming back. Dorothy climbed onto the hospital bed beside Nancy. Good. I didn't like her. She made Mama cry. Kevin sat on the other side of the bed, his arm around Nancy's shoulders. For the first time in 8 years he felt completely at peace. Daddy, Dorothy said, now that the mean lady is gone, can we be a real family? Kevin looked at Nancy, who was smiling through tears of relief and joy. We already are a real family, Dorothy. We always were. 1 week later, Nancy was released from the hospital with a clean bill of health. Kevin had arranged for her and Dorothy to stay in his penthouse while they figured out their future together, but first, there was somewhere important he wanted to take them. Where are we going, Daddy? Dorothy asked from the back seat of Kevin's car. She wore a bright blue dress that Kevin had bought for her, and she was practically bouncing with excitement. It's a surprise, Kevin said, glancing in the rearview mirror at his daughter's eager face. Nancy, sitting beside him in a beautiful green dress that reminded him of the day they met, reached over and squeezed his hand. Kevin, you've already done so much for us. The medical bills, the clothes, letting us stay with you. Nancy, you and Dorothy are my family. I want to do these things. But the penthouse is so fancy. Dorothy's going to break something expensive. Kevin laughed. Then we'll buy something new. Nancy, I want you both to be comfortable in my home. Our home. They drove through Central Park, past the lake where Kevin had proposed 8 years ago. Dorothy pressed her face to the window, watching the joggers and families enjoying the sunny afternoon. The park is so pretty, she said. Can we have a picnic here sometime? Anytime you want, sweetheart. Kevin pulled into the parking area near the children's playground. Dorothy gasped with delight when she saw the swings and slides. Is this the surprise? Can I play? Of course you can play. But first, there's something I want to show you and Mama. He led them to a bench overlooking the lake, the same bench where he had proposed to Nancy. The afternoon sun sparkled on the water, and families with children played nearby. This is where I asked your Mama to marry me, Kevin told Dorothy. Dorothy looked between her parents with wide eyes. Really? What did Mama say? She said yes, Nancy said softly, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And then what happened? Kevin and Nancy exchanged glances. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that their love story was interrupted by lies and manipulation? Sometimes, Kevin said carefully, grown-ups make mistakes. Mama and I got separated for a while, but we never stopped loving each other. And now you're back together forever? Forever, Kevin confirmed. Dorothy clapped her hands. This is the best surprise ever. Actually, Kevin said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, this is the surprise. Nancy's breath caught as she recognized the ring box. Kevin, what are you doing? Kevin got down on one knee beside the bench just as he had 8 years ago. Dorothy squealed with excitement, drawing the attention of other families nearby. Nancy Johnson, Kevin said, his voice strong and clear, 8 years ago I asked you to marry me in this exact spot. I'm asking again. Will you be my wife? Will you let me be Dorothy's father? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making up for the time we lost? Nancy was crying now, happy tears that sparkled in the sunlight. Yes, Kevin. Yes to everything. Kevin slipped the emerald ring onto her finger for the second time, and this time he knew nothing would ever take it away again. Dorothy threw herself into their embrace. Are we really going to be a family now? We already are a family, Nancy said, kissing her daughter's forehead. Now we're just making it official. Can I be in the wedding? Kevin laughed. Dorothy, you're going to be the most important person in the wedding. More important than the bride and groom? Well, maybe not more important, but just as important. As they sat on the bench, watching the sun set over the lake, Kevin felt a sense of completeness he hadn't experienced in 8 years. Nancy was warm and solid beside him, Dorothy was chattering excitedly about wedding plans, and the ring was finally back where it belonged. Kevin, Nancy said quietly. I need to tell you something. What is it? I'm scared. Not about marrying you but about everything else. Your world, your lifestyle, the media attention when they find out about us. Kevin turned to face her fully. Nancy, what are you afraid of specifically? I'm afraid I won't fit in. I'm afraid people will think I'm just after your money. I'm afraid Dorothy will be overwhelmed by all the changes. Look at me, Kevin said, taking her hands in his. I fell in love with you when you were a secretary and I was nobody special. I love you for who you are, not for how you fit into my world. And anyone who has a problem with that can find somewhere else to be. But what about Dorothy? She's used to a simple life. She's never had money or fancy things. Dorothy looked up from where she had been chasing a butterfly. Mama, are you worried about me? A little baby. Daddy's life is very different from ours. Dorothy came back to the bench and climbed onto Kevin's lap. Daddy, will you still love me if I break something in your fancy house? Dorothy, I will love you no matter what you do. You could break everything I own and I would just be happy you're there to break it. See, Mama? Daddy loves us no matter what. Nancy smiled through her tears. When did you get so wise? I learned it from you, Dorothy said seriously. You always told me that the people who really love you won't care if you make mistakes. Kevin felt his heart swell with pride for his daughter's wisdom and Nancy's parenting. Nancy, he said, we'll take everything slowly. If Dorothy wants to stay in public school, she can. If you want to start your event planning business, we'll make it happen. This is about us being together, not about changing who you are. Can I really start my business? Nancy, I've been waiting 8 years to help you achieve your dreams. Your business is going to be the most successful event planning company in the city. As they drove home to Kevin's penthouse, Dorothy fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by excitement and emotion. Nancy held Kevin's hand as he drove through the quiet city streets. I love you, she said softly. I love you too. Both of you. More than I ever thought possible. Kevin, I want to do this right. The wedding, I want Dorothy to remember it forever. Then we'll plan the most beautiful wedding in the world. And Dorothy will be the flower girl. What if she's too nervous? Nancy, look at our daughter. Does she seem like the type to be nervous about being the center of attention? Nancy laughed, glancing back at Dorothy's peaceful sleeping face. You're right. She'll probably steal the show. I hope she does. As they pulled into the parking garage of Kevin's building, Nancy felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Tomorrow they would start planning their new life together. Tonight, they would be a family under the same roof for the first time in Dorothy's life. Ready? Kevin asked, gently shaking Dorothy awake. Ready, Nancy said, and for the first time in 8 years she truly meant it. 3 months later, Nancy stood in the bridal suite at the Plaza Hotel, surrounded by flowing white silk and her dreams finally coming true. Her wedding dress was elegant but not ostentatious, with delicate beading that caught the light when she moved. She had chosen it because Kevin once told her she looked like an angel in white. Mama, you look like a princess, Dorothy said, twirling in her flower girl dress. The bright red gown was Dorothy's favorite color, and she looked absolutely radiant. Dr. Patricia Chin, who had become like family over the past months, was helping Dorothy with her flower crown. You both look absolutely beautiful. Nancy smiled at her reflection, but her hands were shaking slightly. What if I trip walking down the aisle? What if I forget my vows? Mama, Dorothy said seriously, Daddy loves you so much he wouldn't care if you walked down the aisle backwards in your pajamas. Nancy laughed despite her nerves. How did you get so smart? I learned from the best mama in the world. A soft knock interrupted them. Nancy? It's Rebecca. Can I come in? Rebecca Torres had become Nancy's closest friend over the past months, helping her navigate the complicated world of being engaged to one of the city's most prominent businessmen. The photographer wants a few shots of you and Dorothy before the ceremony, Rebecca said, but she paused when she saw Nancy's expression. Hey, are you okay? Just nervous. This is really happening. Cold feet. No, the opposite. I'm worried something will go wrong and ruin it. Rebecca sat beside Nancy on the elegant sofa. Nancy, do you know what Kevin was doing at 6 this morning? Sleeping, I hope. Calling the florist to make sure your favorite flowers were perfect. At 7, he was checking on the cake to make sure the bakery got Dorothy's special request for pink frosting roses. At 8, he was reviewing the seating chart for the 4th time to make sure your former foster parents had the best view. Nancy's eyes filled with tears. He invited the Hendersons? They're in the front row crying with pride. They said you look exactly like the happy ending they always hoped you'd find. Dorothy, Nancy called, come here, sweetheart. Dorothy bounced over, her flower crown slightly askew but her smile radiant. Are you ready to walk down the aisle and give Daddy the biggest surprise of his life? What surprise? Nancy pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band, sized perfectly for Dorothy's small finger. Daddy is adopting you today. After the wedding ceremony, the judge is going to make it official. This ring shows that you're choosing to be a Barton family forever. Dorothy's eyes went wide. Really? I get to be Dorothy Barton for real? For real and forever. Dorothy threw her arms around Nancy. This is the best day ever. 20 minutes later, Nancy stood at the back of the grand ballroom, her arm linked with Tom Anderson's. Kevin had asked Tom to walk her down the aisle, and Nancy had been touched by the gesture. You ready for this? Tom asked quietly. I've been ready for 8 years. The music began, and Dorothy started her walk down the aisle, scattering rose petals with dramatic flair. She was clearly enjoying being the center of attention, and guests were charming as she stopped to wave at people she recognized. Then Nancy saw Kevin at the altar and everything else faded away. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that made his eyes seem even brighter than usual. But it was his expression that took Nancy's breath away. He was looking at her like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever whispered, like she was the miracle he had stopped believing in. Halfway down the aisle, Nancy felt her composure begin to slip. 8 years of separation, 3 months of rebuilding their relationship, and now this moment when everything would finally be right again. Kevin saw her tears and stepped forward, meeting her 3/4 of the way down the aisle. It wasn't traditional, but Kevin had never cared much about tradition when it came to Nancy. Hey, he said softly, taking her hands in his. No crying. You'll ruin your makeup. These are happy tears. I know. I love your happy tears. Together, they walked the final steps to the altar, where Dorothy was waiting with the rings and the biggest smile Nancy had ever seen. Dearly beloved, the minister began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Kevin and Nancy, and to celebrate a love that has endured separation, overcome obstacles, and brought together a beautiful family. Nancy barely heard the traditional words. She was focused entirely on Kevin's face, on the love and promise she saw there, on the knowledge that this time, nothing would tear them apart. Kevin, the minister said, do you take Nancy to be your wife, to love and cherish in sickness and health, for richer and poorer, for better and worse, as long as you both shall live? I do, Kevin said, his voice strong and sure. I always have and I always will. Nancy, do you take Kevin to be your husband, to love and cherish in sickness and health, for richer and poorer, for better and worse, as long as you both shall live? I do, Nancy whispered, then louder, I do. Dorothy stepped forward with the rings, performing her duties with the seriousness of someone handling crown jewels. With this ring, Kevin said, slipping the wedding band beside Nancy's engagement ring, I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life. With this ring, Nancy said, her voice steady now, I promise to love you through everything life brings us for the rest of my life. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Kevin, you may kiss your bride. Kevin cupped Nancy's face in his hands and kissed her with 8 years of longing and a lifetime of love. The guests erupted in applause, but Nancy only heard the sound of her own heartbeat and Dorothy's excited squealing. And now, the minister said with a smile, we have one more very special ceremony. Judge Morrison stepped forward, and Dorothy's adoption ceremony began. It was simple but profound, the legal recognition of what everyone already knew. Dorothy belonged with Kevin and Nancy, and they belonged together as a family. Dorothy, Judge Morrison said, do you want Kevin Barton to be your daddy forever? Yes, please, Dorothy said, making the guests laugh. Kevin, do you accept all the responsibilities and joys of being Dorothy's father? With all my heart, Kevin said, kneeling down to slip the ring onto Dorothy's finger. Then by the power vested in me, I declare that Dorothy Williams is now legally Dorothy Barton, daughter of Kevin and Nancy Barton. Dorothy launched herself into Kevin's arms and Nancy joined their embrace, and for the first time in 8 years, everything was exactly as it should be. As they walked back down the aisle as a family, Nancy caught sight of Susan Blake sitting alone in the very back row. She had been released on bail pending her trial, and Nancy had insisted that Kevin allow her to attend. Not out of kindness to Susan, but because Nancy wanted her to see exactly what real love looked like. Susan's face was a mask of pain and regret, and for just a moment, Nancy felt sorry for her. Susan had had everything she thought she wanted, but she had never had what really mattered. Then Kevin squeezed her hand, Dorothy laughed at something Tom said, and Nancy forgot about Susan completely. This was her life now. This was her family. And this time, nothing would ever tear them apart. 6 months after the wedding, Nancy stood in the main conference room of Barton Tech, presenting her business plan to Kevin's board of directors. She wore a sharp emerald green suit that Kevin had given her for luck, and her confidence had grown tremendously over the past months. Johnson Barton Events has secured contracts for 12 major corporate events this quarter, she said, clicking to the next slide of her presentation. Our profit margins exceed industry standards, and client satisfaction ratings are at 98%. Kevin watched from the back of the room, his heart swelling with pride. Nancy had built her event planning business from nothing into one of the city's most sought-after companies. She was brilliant, hardworking, and completely in her element. "Mrs. Barton," said board member Helen Morrison, "your success is impressive, but we're curious about potential conflicts of interest, given your relationship to our CEO." Nancy's smile was calm and professional. "Ms. Morrison, Johnson Barton Events operates independently of Barton Tech. We have our own offices, our own clients, and our own profit structure." Kevin recused himself from any board decisions regarding our contract with Barton Tech. "And if someone suggests you only succeed because of your marriage? Then I'd point them to our client testimonials, our financial records, and our industry awards. Success speaks for itself." The board members exchanged approving glances. Nancy had won them over completely. After the meeting, Kevin walked Nancy to her car in the parking garage. "I'm so proud of you," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You were magnificent in there. I was terrified. You didn't show it. You looked like you belonged in that boardroom." Nancy laughed. "That's because I do belong there. It just took me a while to believe it." They were interrupted by the sound of running footsteps. Dorothy came racing across the parking garage, still wearing her school uniform but with her backpack flying behind her. "Mama. Daddy. Guess what happened at school today?" "What happened, sweetheart?" Nancy asked, kneeling down to catch her daughter. "Mrs. Patterson asked me to read my essay about families to the whole class, and everyone clapped, and Tommy Martinez said I have the best parents ever." Kevin felt that familiar warmth in his chest that came whenever Dorothy talked about their family. "What did you write about?" "I wrote about how sometimes families get lost and then find each other again. And how love is stronger than anything that tries to break it apart." Nancy's eyes filled with tears. "Dorothy, that's beautiful. Can we go get ice cream to celebrate?" "Celebrate what?" Kevin asked. "Mama's business meeting and me reading my essay, and us being the happiest family in the world." As they drove to Dorothy's favorite ice cream shop, Kevin reflected on how much their lives had changed in less than a year. Nancy's business was thriving, Dorothy was excelling in her new private school, and Kevin had never been happier both personally and professionally. "Kevin," Nancy said quietly while Dorothy was deciding between chocolate and strawberry ice cream, "I have something to tell you." "What's that?" "Dr. Chin called with my test results today." Kevin felt a momentary flash of concern. "Is everything okay?" Nancy's smile was radiant. "Everything is perfect. We're going to have a baby." Kevin stared at her for a moment, processing the words. "A baby? Really? Really?" Kevin swept Nancy into his arms, spinning her around the ice cream shop while other customers stared and smiled. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Dorothy asked, running over with her ice cream cone. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Something wonderful is happening. You're going to be a big sister." Dorothy's eyes went wide. "Really? I'm getting a baby brother or sister?" "In about 7 months," Nancy said. Dorothy squealed with excitement, nearly dropping her ice cream. "This is the best day ever. Can I help name the baby? Can I teach it how to read? Will it sleep in my room?" "Slow down," Kevin laughed. "We have plenty of time to figure all that out." That night, after Dorothy had finally fallen asleep from exhaustion and excitement, Kevin and Nancy sat on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out over the city lights. "Are you happy about the baby?" Nancy asked, curled up against Kevin's side. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Nancy, a year ago I thought my life was complete as it was. Now I can't imagine how I ever thought that was enough. Do you think Dorothy will really be okay with sharing our attention?" "Are you kidding? She's going to be the world's most devoted big sister. She'll probably try to do the baby's homework for it." Nancy laughed. "You're probably right." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city sparkle below them. "Kevin," Nancy said eventually, "do you ever think about Susan? About what she's doing now?" Kevin considered the question. Susan had been sentenced to 2 years in prison for fraud and conspiracy. Her Aunt Patricia had received a similar sentence. The trials had been difficult, but they had also provided closure. Sometimes, he said honestly. Mostly I feel sorry for her. She had so much, but she was never able to appreciate it because she was always scheming for more. Do you think she'll ever find happiness? I hope so. But she'll have to learn what love really means first. And what does love really mean? Kevin pulled Nancy closer. Love means putting someone else's happiness before your own. Love means building up instead of tearing down. Love means choosing each other every day even when it's not easy. Love means never giving up even when everything seems impossible. Love means forgiveness and second chances and believing in forever. Nancy tilted her face up to kiss him. I love you, Kevin Barton. I love you too, Nancy Barton. And I love Dorothy, and I love the baby we're going to have, and I love the life we're building together. Even when Dorothy decides to redecorate the living room with finger paints? Especially then. As they went inside to check on Dorothy one more time before bed, Kevin felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. The pain of their separation had been real, but it had also made them stronger. They appreciated each other more, fought for their relationship harder, and never took their happiness for granted. Dorothy was fast asleep, clutching the stuffed elephant Kevin had bought her the day after their first meeting. Her face was peaceful and happy, the face of a child who knew she was completely loved and protected. Sweet dreams, baby girl, Nancy whispered, tucking the blankets around their daughter. Sweet dreams, Dorothy, Kevin added. Dream about being the best big sister in the world. As they walked to their own bedroom, hand in hand, Kevin realized that this was what he had been searching for his entire life without knowing it. Not success or wealth or recognition, but this simple, profound joy of being exactly where he belonged with exactly the right people, building exactly the right life. Outside their window, the city continued its endless cycle of lights and movement, but inside their home, everything was peaceful and perfect and exactly as it should be. And for the first time in 8 years, Kevin Barton went to sleep knowing that he would wake up tomorrow morning with everything he had ever dreamed of still right there beside him. Their love story had begun with a simple greeting and a green dress. It had been interrupted by lies and manipulation and years of separation. But it had survived because real love always finds a way. And this time it would last forever. What started with a child's letter had become the foundation of a love that would span generations. Dorothy would grow up knowing that love conquers all, that families can heal from anything, and that sometimes the best stories have the longest waits for their happy endings. Can love really overcome years of separation, lies, and manipulation to bring a family together? Subscribe and share your thoughts about second chances and the power of true love in the comments below. Your engagement helps us create more stories about hope, healing, and the courage to fight for what matters most. As Kevin drifted off to sleep with his wife in his arms and their daughter safe down the hall, he smiled at the thought of the future they would build together. A future filled with birthday parties Nancy would plan, business successes they would celebrate together, and quiet moments when they would remember how close they came to losing it all. But they hadn't lost it. They had found each other again, stronger and wiser and more grateful than ever. And that, Kevin thought as sleep finally claimed him, was the greatest success story of all.